you've just wrapped up participating in the Me Made May challenge, or you've recently had a wardrobe sort out, you're probably left with a bunch of items that are no longer working for you. So what can you do with the garments that you're just not wearing? In this week's solo episode, I'll share my method for diagnosing why you're not wearing them. I'll then be suggesting 5 different ways you can update those garments so you're excited to wear them again. So stick around a few minutes for that. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Are you doing okay, lovely one? How's your day going? Massive thanks to all of you who left comments, messages and sent emails to say how much you enjoyed last week's episode with BD Parker. I knew you'd like it. She is such an inspiration. For example, Lindsay Ashworth-Fraser on Instagram said, "Absolutely loved this episode. What a legend she is. Literally could have listened to her all day long. Thank you for the brilliant interview. BD for president." Thanks for that, Lindsay. I could not agree more. Big thanks this week to Leonie, Roses, Gina and Mo. These lovely people have signed up to support the podcast with monthly donations over the last 7 days, and I am super grateful. In fact, I have a little update for the podcast patrons. In addition to the monthly mending meetups that take place via Zoom, I'm also going to be trialling out another kind of social sewing meetup. We're going to try a work in progress unfinished objects community sewing session. So if you've got a sewing project that you have just got stuck on and you need a little push to get it going again, this is the session for you. So the first one is scheduled for the 9th of June. And if it goes well, I'll add some more ones for different time zones. And they can be on our social sewing calendar going forwards. So I hope to see you there, lovely patrons. And if you'd like in on these sessions, the barrier to entry is incredibly low because you can become a patron of Check Your Thread for literally £1 or $1 or €1 or any other currency per month. So it is really super accessible, even if you're working with a lower income. And it goes a long way to helping me keep this podcast ship afloat. So you can find the link to sign up in the show notes on your podcast app right now or via the website checkyourthread.com. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. So if you participated in the Me Made May challenge this year, congratulations! I hope you found it really illuminating and useful. Hopefully you learned a whole heap of lessons about your style, your body and your preferences. But what about all those items that you're no longer wearing? And even if you didn't take part in Me Made May, you might have recently had a sort out of your clothes, as many people do when the seasons change. So basically, I made this episode to help you deal with the unwanted items more sustainably. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions to the episode, including any ideas or tips that you think I've missed. So you can always get in touch with me via Instagram at checkyourthread or via email zoe@checkyourthread. Zoe is Z-O-E. So until next week, take care of yourself, analyse your unworn garments and enjoy. So the most recent round of the Handmade Wardrobe Challenge Me Made May wrapped up last week. If you took part, I hope you had a wonderful and a useful challenge. I hope you had lots of takeaways and learnt heaps of lessons about your existing items and your preferences. The goal now, of course, is to use those takeaways and lessons to inform your garment making going forwards. Knowing what you know now, which items were a joy to wear, which didn't feel physically comfortable, which weren't reflective of your personal style, which items you didn't reach for at all, and which were difficult to combine into an outfit. Knowing all that should help you plan more successful projects in the future. So that is all awesome and incredibly valuable, of course. However, it's not just lessons that you're now left with. It's very likely that you're now also left with a bunch of me-mades that just aren't working for you anymore. So whilst it's all still fresh in your mind which items you don't enjoy wearing, I want to share with you some ideas of things that you can do to get those items working better for you. Hopefully you can get them back into wardrobe rotation to properly honour the time and the energy and the skills and resources that originally went into the garment, rather than just bagging them up and sending them to your local thrift store or charity shop to an unknown fate. Many times over the years, at the end of a Me Made May challenge, I've seen people announce that they've had a big purge of Me Mades that they no longer wear. The majority of those unworn Me Mades have most likely been sent off to the local thrift store, charity shop or op shop. After all, that's the standard solution that most of us resort to after a wardrobe clear out. However, as we are all collectively learning, sending items off to a second-hand store isn't necessarily a great solution. If you want to learn more about this, please check out the Clothes Horse podcast because host Amanda regularly covers this in great detail. But in short, here's why sending clothes to thrift stores isn't a great solution. So, the majority of clothing donations that are received by a charity or a second-hand store do not end up on the shop floor. In fact, only between 10 and 30% of donations actually get sold in store. A bigger proportion of clothing donations actually gets shipped overseas to countries in the global south. This creates huge problems for the populations who are forced to deal with them, and it messes with their local economies and their domestic clothing industries and pollutes their local ecosystems. Another common fate for our well-intentioned donations is to end up in a landfill closer to home. This also damages ecosystems by poisoning waterways and such. And sometimes unwanted or unsellable textile items are incinerated, which results in the production of greenhouse gases and contributes to global warming. And some clothing donations will end up being recycled, but the current textile recycling technology that is usually used actually downcycles the textiles by ragging or shredding them and then turning them into low-grade textile items that are used as stuffing and the like. The current technology in use doesn't create fibres that can actually be used to make new clothing. As we've discussed on this podcast previously, we need to keep everything at its highest level of possible use. And for clothing, that's staying in use as a piece of clothing. Eep. I don't know about you, but with those odds, sending unwanted clothing to charity shops feels a bit dicey. Obviously, the best case scenario of sending your unworn Me Made to a charity shop is that it does get hung up on a rack on the shop floor and it does make it into the hands of someone who wants to buy and wear it. This can and does happen, but statistics show that this is a small minority of donations. And what is extra concerning about sending handmade items to a charity shop is that they're usually going to be unlabelled and unsized and without care instructions, and that those might automatically be rejected depending on that company's processing systems and policies. All of which to say, we have a responsibility to not just bag up unwanted items and make them someone else's responsibility and then start again. We need to try to either get an unwanted item into the hands of someone we know who actually wants to wear it, or we need to rework it in some way so that we ourselves want to continue to own and wear it. So let me help you to do that. So first, I'm going to talk you through how to triage these unworn Me Mades to work out what the best strategy for dealing with each of them is. Then I'm going to offer up 5 approaches for reworking the garments, each with the potential to transform your item from meh to something you're excited to wear. Okay, let's get into it. Let's talk about how to triage an unwanted item. Now, it might be really obvious why you're not wearing a particular item, such as there's a hole in the cuff, or it's too tight across the chest, or the colour makes you look washed out. Well, that's great, and we'll talk about actually doing the work in a bit. But there are often items with issues that are harder to pinpoint. So what I would advise when it comes to these items is to look at the topic from the other direction. What makes you want to wear a garment and wear it often? If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you will have heard me say that a successful garment needs to fit your personal style, fit your lifestyle, and fit your body. If a garment is doing all 3 well, then you'll want to reach for it. If it's lacking in one or more of these categories, then it's not going to see much or any wear at all. So let me repeat that and break it down a bit more. A garment needs to fit your personal style, i.e., it really needs to chime with who you are aesthetically, transitory style and fashion trends aside. It can be a garment that is on trend, but there has to be an aspect to it that feels very you. The exception to this rule might be if it's a really plain basic garment. Those garments might not sing to your soul, but they might still get heaps of use if they pair really well with other items that you own that you really vibe with. So that could be a pair of plain black shorts or a simple denim skirt or some other basic type of garment that really works well with the hero piece of an outfit. A garment needs to fit with your lifestyle, so i.e. it has to be suitable for one or preferably more of the regular arenas of your life. Can you wear that item in your workplace, your preferred leisure activities, around the home, or whilst travelling? Whatever you get up to regularly, wherever you regularly do it, and in what climate you usually find yourself doing it in. So it is totally cool to have some items that you only reach for on occasion, like going for a fancy meal or a beach holiday. But every item has to be suitable for at least something you get up to within your year. When it comes to suitability for your lifestyle, it's really important to think about details. You might think that button-up shirts would work for your occupation on paper, but if the neck is too tight or the sleeves are too flowy for whatever it is you do, then it's not actually suitable for your lifestyle. And fabrics can really make or break a garment suitability as well. If you make something for travelling, but it always needs ironing, or you make something out of a fibre that makes you feel sweaty during a busy day, then they're not going to work. And finally, a garment needs to fit your body. When something doesn't feel comfortable, you're always going to pass over it in favour of something that does. No one should feel uncomfortable in their day-to-day, and as garment makers, we have more of an ability to prevent that than the people that have to rely on shop-bought clothing. So let's use that superpower and get our clothing fitting us well. So whether the garment never fit well or your body has changed, there's probably more you can do to refit an existing garment than you realise. Okay, so with those three aspects of clothing suitability in mind, fitting your style, fitting your lifestyle, and fitting your body, try on those Unworn Me Mades one at a time. You might even need to wear it as you go about your day for a bit. Then make some notes on which of those three aspects you think this Me Made is letting you down. Remember, it might be more than one. If you can figure out where the problem lies, then you've taken a huge step towards solving that garment's problem. And please take on board what I just said there. What's the garment's problem? It's not your problem and it's not your body's problem. If something doesn't fit because your body changed shape, for example, it's not your body's fault for changing. Bodies change. That's what bodies do. If we can alter a garment to make it work, then great. We don't hate on our body for changing and we don't force it to wear uncomfortable, ill-fitting clothes. Similarly, if you have certain tactile or sensory requirements related to clothing, and if something doesn't make you feel good, that's not your problem. You deserve to feel good. So let's see what we can do to a garment to make it work better for you. Okay, so hopefully now you have a good idea which area your garment isn't performing well in. Here are 5 ways that you can change a garment that might address the issue that is preventing you from wearing it. Obviously, you're going to have to consider each item and see which of these is most relevant. There's repair, refit, remove something, add something, and change the colour. So let's go into each one in more detail. Let's start with repair because this is the solution that is easiest to diagnose. So it's obvious when there's a button missing or the seam stitching has popped or the fabric is thinning at the inner thigh. If you're lacking in motivation to tackle it and you have a whole heap of repairs piling up, then you could consider signing up to a mending challenge such as the Winter of Care and Repair. And that could give you the push you need to get into it. Or maybe you could just meet up with some friends and you could each tackle a mend over coffee. However, even though you know what needs to be repaired, it doesn't always follow that you will know exactly how to approach the repair. And if you're a bit stumped and you're not too sure which technique to try or which materials to source to make the repair long-lasting, then please check out episode 135, which is How to Triage Your Mends with Jaina Wigger. So I just discovered that my very favourite stripy top, the one that I think looks best under dungarees, has got a hole in the armpit. So the next time I'm at my machine, I'm going to stitch it closed. Right, let's move on to refitting a garment. A garment might not be fitting you well in any number of ways, so you'll need to do a bit of analysing to work out how the fit needs to be adjusted. It's possible the garment is generally too big or generally too small, or there might be an aspect of the garment that isn't right. For example, the shoulders might be too square for your frame, or the sleeves might be too tight, or the neckline too wide, or the waistband might be sitting away from your body at the small of your back. Obviously, I can't go through every potential fit issue and how you can alter your garment accordingly. However, once you've got an idea of what's up with your garment, I really recommend doing an online search, finding any blog posts or YouTube videos or other resources related to that issue. Do check out Check Your Thread episode 86, Garment Alterations with Naomi Feta, if you haven't already. Naomi is an alterations expert who shared some fantastic tips. For example, one tip from Naomi that stayed with me is this. If you need to let a garment out or take it in, try to do so at multiple places around the garment, not just at the side seams if at all possible. That helps to keep the proportions of the original garment, and it also gives you more scope for letting the garment out sufficiently if that's what you need to do. This year's Me Made May helped me realise that I have 2 pairs of trousers that need some refitting to make me more excited to wear them. I have some jeans that fit well through the waist and the hips, but they feel too roomy in the legs. And I have some cropped elasticated waist trousers that feel just too wide in the hips and too high at the waist, so they're things that I need to work on. The third idea for updating Unworn Me Mades is to remove something. So a garment might not be working and not really feeling like you when maybe there's a detail that feels odd or somehow it's overly fussy, and that can really prevent us from reaching for it when we're getting dressed. There might be something about that garment that was super on trend when you made it, but now it feels a bit dated, although the bones of the garment itself are still good. So some ideas that are worth considering. Removing a collar and then finishing that neck edge with bias binding instead. Or removing a ruffle at the hem if it feels too flouncy, or taking off the sleeves and making the item sleeveless, or removing the cuffs and then just hemming the sleeves or adding elastic at the bottom edge instead, or swapping out some very attention-grabbing buttons for something more subtle. These changes will be much quicker than creating a new garment, and I'm sure you'll be surprised by the impact that they'll have on the overall feel of the garment. Another aspect of removing is removing length. So a long dress could easily be made shorter for a very different look, or even made into a top and or a skirt. A jumpsuit could be made into a play suit, or a top and or trousers. Long trousers could be updated by making them into crop trousers, or even shorts. I just suggested making a sleeved garment into a sleeveless one, but you don't have to go that far. Longer sleeves can be made into 3/4 length, or elbow length, or short or cap sleeved. If the sleeve has a lot of fullness, you can also remove the sleeves, recut them and reinsert them so that they have less fullness. This is something that I'm about to do to a blouse that I made using the Anthea blouse pattern. I made it using quite a thick denim, and the fullness just kind of feels like too much at the moment. Removing an element of a garment or some length somewhere is such a powerfully simple strategy to play with. And it's something that I personally turn to a lot. So I'm not really a dress person. So there have been plenty of times when I've cut off the bottom of a dress or a tunic garment and hemmed it just to make a top. And then I always get so much more wear out of it. And I also had a self-made jumpsuit from a couple of years ago, and it was just always too short in the body. I realised that I just rarely wore it because of that, so last summer I unpicked the top part and I saved the bottom part by making them into elasticated waist trousers. Now I wear those trousers all the time when it's hot. Okay, so fourth option. So of course, the opposite of that tactic is to add something. Because sometimes just making a nice looking sewing pattern in a nice fabric isn't enough to inspire regular wear. If a garment looks a bit plain or feels a bit meh, it might be time to go the other way and see how you can zhuzh it up with an addition. So this can be a huge amount of fun, but needs to be deployed with care. If you're lucky and the garment in question is indeed a me-made, you might even have some of the original fabric left, which will give you heaps more options. It will also help you make an addition that looks like it was always there. Consider adding bands or ruffles onto sleeves or hems to increase the length. A contrast colour or print could look super fun. If you still have the original pattern pieces, you could remake the whole sleeves in a contrast fabric. Do you remember all those army green coats with like leather or fake leather sleeves that were super trendy a few years ago? They were clearly very wearable. And at the other end of the spectrum, you could choose a highly contrasting fabric, maybe something sheer even. There are so many options of how you could take that. A less invasive approach to adding something to jazz up a plain garment could be to add braid, ribbon, rickrack, lace trim, beading, embroidery, sashiko stitching or iron-on patches. Ribbon, braid and rickrack can look very cute and also quite retro depending on what you've chosen to add and what type of garment it is. Beading and embroidery can be a real work of art, but equally they don't have to be. Think a small row of beads to highlight a part of the garment, or round pearl beads dotted over a basic jumper, or a couple of small embroidered flowers or insects or whatever to emphasise a collar or a yoke. They would have more impact than you might imagine. You could add the collar to a dress or top that has a plain neckline. To simplify this idea, the collar could actually be a separate accessory that is worn with the garment rather than being attached to it. Tilly in the Buttons has a free oversized detachable collar pattern that I'll link to. As the name suggests, it's pretty large and it's got a ruffle edge, but the pattern could easily be customised if that precise look isn't to your taste. You could apply a section of contrast fabric over the entire part of a garment, like Sarah, who I met at the Mending in Public event that you can hear about in episode 133. Sarah applied a section of leopard print fabric over the back yoke of her denim jacket, and it looked so good. And never underestimate the power of swapping boring buttons for more fun or eye-catching ones. I also really love the idea of finding a mix of completely different buttons, albeit the same size, and giving a pretty random look to a plain garment. And if you rarely wear something because it doesn't have pockets, then there are lots of ways you can add pockets to an existing garment, like unpicking the side seams and adding inseam pockets, or applying patch pockets. Or if that sounds a bit head-scratchy, you could make a separate mini bag that can be worn at the waist and acts like a pocket. Friday Pattern Company have a pattern called the Bernie Belt Bag that could be a good option for this. Similarly, if you've got pockets that never seem to lay flat properly, could you unpick them or could you stitch the pocket mouth down? Something that I've been doing a lot on my kids' clothes lately is adding decorative pre-made iron-on patches. Sometimes it's been to disguise an unwanted embroidery on a hand-me-down t-shirt, and other times it's simply been to personalise a very plain garment and make it feel more unique. So the last idea for altering an unworn Me Made is to change the colour. Now, this has its limitations, but for the right garment made from the right fibre types, it can be a total game changer. So, if a garment is made from a natural fibre, such as cotton or linen, or a regenerated fibre, such as viscose, tencel, modal, cooper or ramie, or it has a decent percentage of one of those fibres alongside some synthetic content, then it should be able to be dyed. Or maybe we should be saying over-dyed. So if the original colour of the garment is pretty dark, then your options might be limited to refreshing the original colour, which can help a tired, faded garment look newer. If the original fabric has a print, then over-dyeing won't disguise the original print, but it should alter its coloration. So just remember the colour rules you learned at school. If you're dyeing a pink or red fabric with a blue dye, you'll end up with purple. And if you're using that blue dye on a yellow garment, it's going to end up some kind of green. You get the idea. If the original fabric is pale, you could have a lot of fun trying out natural dye stuffs. If this appeals to you, then there are 3 awesome episodes of Check Your Thread to guide and inspire you. There's episode 13 and episode 88 with natural dye teacher Amy Taylor, and episode 52 with designer and grower Bella Goncharovich. Natural dyeing is very exciting, in part because the results can be slightly unpredictable. If you want more predictability, it's probably better to go with a shop-bought synthetic dye such as Dylon or RIT. I'm a big fan of refreshing the colour of faded jeans. I've done this a number of times and the results have always been impressive. And earlier this year, my son and I had fun tie-dyeing some of his old plain white polo shirts to make them into items he can wear outside of school over the summer. So there you go. All these ideas are listed in the show notes on the website checkyourthread.com. This is episode 137. There you'll also find the links to the podcast episodes and the sewing patterns mentioned. I really hope that this episode provided you with a range of possibilities and that you're excited to apply some of them to your Unworn Me Mates. I hope that some of those garments become your very favourite items and that they jump back into regular rotation. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!